Welcome back to Beyond Global Waves, where we really dive deep into all these global trends. And today we're tackling a debate that honestly feels like it's gone from simmering to like a full-on boil, woke versus anti-woke.
It really is fascinating how these terms, and I think woke in particular, have kind of migrated from, these like kind of niche online discussions to like mainstream media and even like political platforms. It's really become this lens through which we're viewing everything these days, from corporate decisions to, global power dynamics.
It really does. It's like this almost this invisible force field, crackling between different worldviews. But to really grasp its impact, I think we need to like rewind a bit, don't we?
Absolutely. I mean, the term woke itself originated in Black communities. And, it really was about emphasizing awareness of social injustices and a call to kind of stay vigilant against inequality. But its meaning has definitely evolved over time. It's become much broader and honestly often weaponized in today's highly polarized climate.
So woke kind of starts as this call for social awareness, but then you have anti-woke emerging as a counter movement, often used to kind of critique ideas or actions deemed overly progressive or too much.
Yeah, and this is where the political landscape, particularly in the U.S., gets really interesting. Figures like Donald Trump have really effectively tapped into this anti-woke sentiment, framing it as a defense of traditional values against a perceived radical agenda. And it's not just rhetoric either. It's actually shaping policy.
Project 2025 is a prime example of this. This conservative blueprint, should a Republican win the White House in 2024, explicitly aims to dismantle what it calls the woke bureaucracy in the federal government. And we're already kind of seeing some of this play out, aren't we, with some of Trump's recent executive orders?
Yeah, absolutely. Those executive orders targeting DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs are a clear example of how this anti-woke agenda is translating into very concrete action. I mean, it's affecting everything from federal hiring practices to like contracting decisions.
Okay, so we've got this clash of ideologies with potentially huge implications. But what does it all mean for us, the everyday folks caught in the crossfire? How does cancel culture fit into this whole equation?
Well, cancel culture kind of adds another layer of complexity to all of this. I mean, it's essentially a form of social pressure, often fueled by online platforms, where individuals or organizations face severe backlash for perceived offensive actions or statements.
Yeah, it feels like the stakes have never been higher for expressing your views these days, even on seemingly trivial matters. One wrong step and you could be canceled by the court of public opinion, right?
Right. And this is where the media's role becomes even more crucial. How this woke versus anti-woke dynamic is framed, reported, and amplified significantly shapes public perception. And often it really fuels the polarization that we're witnessing.
You have mainstream media outlets often portrayed as promoting this woke agenda, while conservative platforms are often accused of pushing an anti-woke narrative. It's like everyone is vying for control of the narrative, which I think can be incredibly confusing for audiences trying to make sense of it all.
Yeah, it creates this feedback loop where perceptions of bias further entrench existing viewpoints. And then, news consumers become wary of sources perceived as leaning too far in either direction, and it becomes increasingly difficult to find any common ground.
So we've got woke evolving from a call for social awareness to a term often used to demonize progressive ideas, with anti-woke emerging as its counterpoint. This battle is playing out in politics, with Project 2025 representing a potential shift in the U.S. federal landscape.
And it's spilling over into other domains as well. I mean, corporations are grappling with where they stand on the spectrum, facing pressure from both sides to align with either woke or anti-woke values.
And the media's right in the thick of it, shaping and being shaped by this whole evolving narrative. It's a lot to unpack, and we're honestly only just scratching the surface. But before we delve deeper, I'm actually curious to hear your thoughts. What aspect of this whole woke versus anti-woke debate stands out to you the most? What questions are swirling in your mind as we kind of navigate this complex landscape?
What strikes me is how pervasive this whole debate has become.
Like it's seeped into everything, hasn't it?
I mean, from the products we buy to the movies we watch.
Even the language we use, it's everywhere.
Yeah, it's really inescapable.
Speaking of products and marketing, corporations are definitely in a tough spot when it comes to this whole woke versus anti-woke thing.
Oh, totally. And the rise of so-called woke capitalism is a really interesting phenomenon. It's this idea that companies are like increasingly trying to weave social justice messaging into their branding and marketing campaigns.
Yeah, I mean, think about like those rainbow-themed products you see everywhere during Pride Month, or like the surge in corporate statements we saw supporting racial justice movements.
Exactly. And some argue that, it's a genuine effort to promote positive social change, but then others see it as a cynical attempt to, just capitalize on these movements for profit.
It's a tough one. Is it even possible for corporations to genuinely champion social causes while also prioritizing shareholder value?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a really delicate balancing act, and consumers are definitely becoming more discerning.
Oh, for sure. We've seen boycotts from both sides, haven't we? Those who feel a company isn't woke enough, and those who feel they've gone way too far.
Absolutely. And it just highlights the challenge for businesses in navigating this, this increasingly polarized landscape.
And it's not just a domestic issue either, right? I mean, this whole woke versus anti-woke tension is playing out globally.
Yeah, absolutely. It's impacting international relations, trade deals, even cultural exchanges. It's everywhere.
I mean, think about the strained relationship between the U.S. and some of its allies over things like climate change and social policies.
Yeah, for sure. And the rise of those populist leaders like Hungary's Viktor Orban, who explicitly reject woke and globalist ideologies, it just exemplifies this global trend.
Yeah, it really seems like this whole debate is reshaping the geopolitical landscape in pretty profound ways.
Totally. And let's not forget the role of the media in all of this.
Yeah, the media both reflects and shapes these cultural and political divisions, right?
Yeah, we've talked about how different media outlets frame these issues, often reinforcing pre-existing biases.
But it goes beyond just the news coverage too, doesn't it? I mean, think about the entertainment industry.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Movies, TV shows, even music are increasingly reflecting these woke versus anti-woke themes.
Sometimes it feels like every piece of media is trying to make a statement.
Yeah, trying to pick a side, and it can be exhausting for consumers who just want to be entertained, without feeling like they're being preached to.
For sure. It raises an important question, though, doesn't it? How can we consume media critically without falling into the trap of echo chambers and confirmation bias?
Yeah, it's definitely a skill we all need to cultivate, especially in today's, information-saturated world.
Absolutely. And speaking of information overload, we have to talk about social media. It's like a giant amplifier for this whole woke versus anti-woke debate.
Oh, totally. Social media platforms have become battlegrounds for these ideological clashes.
Yeah, viral hashtags, trending topics, influencer opinions, it all just contributes to shaping the narrative and often, honestly, intensifies the polarization.
And the algorithms that, curate our feeds often exacerbate this by, showing us content that aligns with our existing beliefs.
Yeah, it's like they create these echo chambers where we're constantly bombarded with information that reinforces our worldview, making it even harder to engage with different alternative perspectives.
Exactly. And this is where the concept of media literacy becomes so crucial.
Media literacy.
Yeah, it's the ability to critically analyze and evaluate the information we encounter, regardless of the source.
So not just, accepting everything we see online, but actually questioning the motives, biases, and agendas behind it.
Exactly. It's about being aware of the techniques used to persuade and manipulate and developing the skills to identify misinformation and disinformation.
That sounds incredibly important, especially in this, age of fake news and deepfakes.
Oh, it's more important than ever. And it's not just about being able to spot falsehoods either. It's also about understanding how information is framed, who benefits from certain narratives, and even how our own biases might be influencing our perceptions.
So how can we develop these media literacy skills? Where do we even begin?
Well, luckily, there are a number of resources available, both online and offline.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, organizations like the Media Literacy Project and Common Sense Media offer excellent resources for individuals of all ages.
And what about our schools and universities? Are they doing enough to equip students with these critical thinking skills?
That's a really good question and one that's worth exploring further. Some schools are incorporating media literacy into their curriculum, but there's definitely room for improvement.
It seems like this should be a fundamental part of education in the 21st century, doesn't it?
I couldn't agree more. Media literacy it's no longer a luxury. It's a necessity for informed and engaged citizenship.
Well said. You've given us a lot to think about, both in terms of understanding this whole woke versus anti-woke debate and the importance of developing those media literacy skills to navigate this crazy, complex information landscape.
It's definitely an ongoing conversation, and I encourage everyone to engage with it thoughtfully and critically.
Now, before we wrap up, I kind of want to shift gears slightly and talk about the impact of all this on another crucial area, education.
It seems like schools and universities have really become battlegrounds for this woke versus anti-woke clash, especially when it comes to like curriculum and diversity initiatives.
We see it everywhere. Debates about critical race theory in schools, concerns about free speech on college campuses, and of course, the constant push for more diversity and inclusion in education.
And these debates get pretty heated, don't they? I mean, we're seeing accusations of like indoctrination and censorship, even cancel culture, from both sides.
Yeah, we've seen cases where faculty members are criticized or even lose their jobs for expressing views that are deemed offensive, which really raises some concerns about academic freedom and whether this is having a chilling effect on open discourse.
That's right. But then you have, the proponents of incorporating these woke perspectives who argue that education needs to reflect the lived experiences of, marginalized communities and challenge these systemic inequalities.
It's like trying to strike this balance, isn't it, between promoting diverse viewpoints while also ensuring that education remained objective and unbiased.
Yeah, exactly. And it's even more complicated by the fact that, education is often seen as a tool for shaping the values and beliefs of future generations.
So the stakes are really high. This isn't just some abstract academic debate. It's about like influencing how young people view the world and their place in it.
Absolutely. And this brings us back to the importance of, media literacy, not just for students, but for everyone.
It's essential to be able to look at information critically, recognize bias, and form our own informed opinions, especially on these complex and honestly often emotionally charged issues.
Yeah, it's about understanding that, education, media, and politics are all interconnected, and that this whole woke versus anti-woke dynamic is playing out across all these spheres.
Like this intricate web of influences, right? Shaping how we see the world.
Exactly. And navigating this web requires awareness, critical thinking skills, and a willingness to engage with different perspectives, even, those that challenge our own assumptions.
So as we kind of wrap up here, what's the key takeaway for our listeners? What should they be thinking about as they step back from this deep dive?
I think the main thing to remember is that this woke versus anti-woke debate is here to stay. It's shaping our culture, our politics, our media, even our education systems.
So it's crucial to be aware of this dynamic, understand its nuances, and develop the critical thinking skills we need to navigate this increasingly complex and polarized landscape.
Don't just take everything you see at face value, question the motives, seek out diverse perspectives, and form your own opinions.
Because at the end of the day, it's up to each of us to decide where we stand on these issues and how we want to engage in this ongoing conversation.
And that's what makes this such a, fascinating and important topic to explore. It's a conversation that demands our attention, our critical thinking skills, and a willingness to, to grapple with complexity.
Well said. This has been a really insightful deep dive into a topic that's clearly having a huge impact on our world. And we hope this conversation has helped our listeners gain a deeper understanding of this whole woke versus anti-woke dynamic and given them the tools to navigate this complex landscape.
As always, we encourage our listeners to keep exploring these issues, to, challenge their own assumptions and to engage in thoughtful and respectful dialogue with those who might hold different viewpoints.
Because ultimately, that's how we can move beyond the polarization and work towards a more informed and inclusive society.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep those critical thinking skills sharp.
And remember, the waves of change are constant, and it's up to us to learn how to ride them.